most people, when they're introduced to Graupner, he's sort of like a trivia answer, with the question being, who was offered the job at the Leipzig Thomaskirche before Bach? And Graupner was the second choice. Of course, Telemann was the first choice, Graupner was the second choice, and then Bach was the third choice. When Graupner couldn't get released from his church position, or his court position in Darmstadt, the city council in Leipzig, that you can find in the archives, they wrote, well, since we couldn't hire this great composer Graupner, I guess we'll have to settle with Bach. So oftentimes people think of Graupner just in terms of this little historical tidbit about him being offered the Leipzig cantorat before Bach. But in fact, he was an incredibly talented composer and really on the forefront of some musical innovations. You hear both sort of an antiquated style as well as a very fresh new style that is emerging, more of the sort of pre-classical style, galant style. You sort of hear this in some of his music. At the same time, a very prolific composer. There are 1,400 extant cantatas, very few of which have been recorded. And of course, those include numerous cantatas for solo bass, 48 of them, in fact, 17 for bass and solo soprano, and then numerous various combinations of choral forces with those soloists. So that's a little bit about Graupner. So he was the court musician in Darmstadt. I stumbled onto Graupner completely by accident. I was looking for some interesting repertoire to record. I thought it would be really fantastic to explore some music that had not been recorded yet in the Baroque repertoire. I was applying for a grant through the University of New Mexico, where I'm a professor. And I was actually looking up the composer Graun. And the first few letters of the composer's names are pretty similar, and up popped Graupner in my Google search. And so, of course, I went down the rabbit hole and never looked back. Still haven't performed any Graun, but I've now performed 6 Graupner cantatas. And it was a very serendipitous discovery. One thing I find really fantastic in Graupner's music is some of the bold harmonic choices that he makes. I remember in some early recording sessions, one of the session engineers saying, "That can't be right. That harmonic shift is just too strange and too bold." But I think that's really part of Graupner's voice. He is an eccentric composer. He will just turn on a dime with an unexpected harmony, or perhaps two unresolved dissonant chords in a row in a recit, for example. And I often tell the story of one of the choral fugues from one of his cantatas is about if you trust in God, you will not get lost. And of course, it's the most complicated fugue you'll ever sing. The text for the fugue subject does not match the length of the musical fugue subject. And so you have all of these overlaid, interlacing lines that don't quite match up the way that one would expect. It's not a cut and dry, neat and clean, tidy fugue. And I think that really shows his sense of humor. So I think in these eccentric elements in Graupner's output, it's really fantastic. So, of course, when I Googled Graun and wound up with Graupner, there was not a lot of recently edited modern editions of these scores. I couldn't log into Amazon or Sheet Music Plus and order a copy of these scores at that time. However, the entirety of his extant music has been scanned by the library in Darmstadt at the university, and so it's all available on the the choral wiki, the IMSLP site. So you can look at all 1,400 cantatas of Graupner as well as some other works. So, of course, when you're presented with so many works, you're not exactly sure which ones are the great ones. I don't think any of us will know that for probably another 10 or 20 years once we've really made more headway with editing those works and recording those works, performing those works. So I made a list of all of the 48 bass solo cantatas. I then did a Google search to see which had been recorded, and I found just a handful of those solo cantatas had been recorded. I marked those off from my choices that I wanted to record, and then I chose several others based on the instrumentation that I was planning to record with to resurrect. The difficulty with Graupner is reading the text in his music. The manuscript itself, where the calligraphy is concerned for the musical notation, is beautiful. I've had string player friends that said they felt like they could play directly from the handwritten manuscript. However, the text is not very clear. So I reached out to a scholar in Germany, Bernhard Schmidt, and Herr Dr. Schmidt edited the texts for us. And this is a hobby of his. He has done dozens of these Graupner texts where he it's not translating, but it's putting it down into a modern schrift, a modern writing, from the old schrift, so that we can actually read it. So he does a brilliant job of typing that up and creating a document, a little PDF that has historical information about the librettist for the cantata, the liturgical year, portion of the year, etc. And so that was the beginning of the score editing. And then I had a musician friend in New York, Jeff Grossman, who did editing of these scores. And then in addition, I had a graduate student who input some of this material into Finale to assist. So we've had numerous folks helping out with this project to edit these scores. So in terms of ranking Graupner among those other composers, I think that it's a funny thing to say, it's too early to know. It's hundreds of years later, but due to the lack of performances and recordings in comparison to the amount of music that's out there, I think it's really hard to sort of make a judgment about his music overall. It could be that I've just recorded the 4 worst cantatas that he wrote. We just don't know. So I'm not sure I feel comfortable making a judgment in terms of ranking him. I think that he really does hold his own from the music that I have performed. He holds his own among many other composers, and I'm very eager to explore further so that I have a better answer. So in my research, I did find that that there was a really fantastic organ in Darmstadt that Graupner used in his performing. Unfortunately, for our purposes here, we did not use the organ in our recording at the University of New Mexico. We were recording at Baroque pitch, and we decided that this instrument was really not the right fit for the sound we wanted. And however, I think that organ as part of the continuo is very appropriate for his repertoire. I investigated the possibility of works that were just solo bass and continuo. However, there aren't any. It's all works of with strings or various combinations of strings and winds. In particular, there's a lot with bassoon. There was a virtuoso bassoonist at the court in Darmstadt. And so there are really interesting arias for bass or soprano, etc., with obligato bassoon parts. So I have yet to perform one of those, but I think it's a fantastic endeavor to investigate those and create some modern performing editions of those, because I know there's some bassoonists out there that would love to get their hands on them. My expectations for this album, I think my highest hope is to introduce more people to the music of Graupner. And of course, this has various reasons. Of course, I think that the general listener will love how straightforward the music is and the beauty and the elegance of the music. So I think the general listener, general audience, will truly enjoy it from that perspective. In addition, I hope that it generates more interest in the musicological community for more research. I think this is a fantastic project for doctoral dissertations or DMA treatises, reviving this music, creating new editions of this music. So that's another real hope. And of course, that hope would lead to the hope that there's more performance of this music. And selfishly, since this is my first recording, I hope that it brings some interest to additional performances in which I get to explore more of Graupner's music with various ensembles around the country, or with the musicians I recorded this performance with. I would be happy to take this repertoire on the road and share it with others. So that's my real hope where Graupner's music and this CD in particular is concerned.